I was 22 years old and invisible, at least. That's how it felt during those first months at Meridian Communications, one of Chicago's most prestigious advertising agencies. I was a junior intern in the marketing department, and my days were filled with photocopying, organizing supply closets, and fetching coffee for people who barely remembered my name. I ate lunch alone at my desk, avoided elevators to escape awkward small talk, and never once spoke in a meeting in high school. I'd been outgoing and confident somewhere along the way, though a string of small failures and rejections in college had chipped away at my self-esteem. By the time I graduated, I felt like a shadow of the person I used to be. This internship was supposed to be a fresh start, but instead, I blended into the background like part of the wallpaper. The one bright spot in my life was my younger brother Danny. He was 8 years old, born deaf, and my whole heart belonged to him. Our parents had struggled with sign language, but I had thrown myself into it with a determination that surprised even me. I practiced for hours, took classes at the community center, and slowly became fluent. By the time I started at Meridian, signing was the one skill I truly felt proud of. Even though it seemed useless in the world of marketing campaigns and corporate meetings, it was like knowing how to play a violin in a place where only electric guitars mattered. Still, it gave my life meaning because it gave Danny a voice. One Tuesday morning in October, that skill I had always thought irrelevant suddenly became everything. The building was buzzing with energy. The team was preparing for a massive client presentation, and the air was filled with tension. My supervisor, Margaret, stationed me near the reception area to help with last-minute organization. That's when I noticed him, a distinguished elderly man standing alone by the desk. He was dressed impeccably in a navy blue suit, silver hair perfectly styled, but his eyes gave him away. Frustration and sadness clouded his expression. He tried to communicate with Jessica, the receptionist, but she looked increasingly impatient. "Sir, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Do you have an appointment?" she asked, handing him a notepad. But his gestures, the subtle movement of his hands, the way his lips formed words without sound, I recognized it instantly. He was signing, and no one understood him. People streamed by without even glancing his way. Executives in polished suits, creative directors juggling boards, assistants rushing to meetings, every single one walked past him like he was invisible. I froze at first. Margaret had made it clear my task was the presentation materials, not helping visitors. But then I thought about Danny. I thought about the way people sometimes looked through him, as though his deafness made him less human. The memory clenched my chest. I couldn't just watch this man wilt in the middle of our bustling lobby. Against every nervous instinct in me, I walked over. "Hello," I signed softly. "My name is Catherine. Can I help you?" The change was instant. Relief washed over his face, and he smiled, really smiled for the first time since stepping into the building. "You sign." His hands moved with the fluid confidence of someone who had used ASL his whole life. Thank goodness. I thought no one here would understand. "I'm so sorry you've had trouble," I signed back. "What do you need?" He explained that he was hoping to see his son, but hadn't been able to arrange an appointment. His hands spelled out a name that made my heart skip. Michael Hartwell, the CEO. The man whose name was etched on the directory and whose office took up the entire top floor. His father was standing right here, unacknowledged, practically dismissed by everyone. I guided him to the seating area and called the CEO's assistant. "Patricia." Her voice was crisp and controlled. "His father." "Are you certain?" She promised to check but warned it could be an hour or more. As we waited, I learned his name Robert and discovered he was an architect who had shaped parts of Chicago's skyline. He told me about his late wife, Michael's mother, a teacher for the deaf, He told me about raising a hearing son as a deaf father, about his pride in Michael's success, and his fear that his son had forgotten how to slow down. I found myself leaning forward, utterly captivated, even as curious glances darted our way from employees who clearly thought I was wasting time. When the minutes stretched on and Patricia still hadn't confirmed a meeting, Robert sighed. Perhaps I should leave. He signed, trying to mask his disappointment. I hesitated. Then, on impulse, I offered, "Would you like me to show you around just while we wait?" His eyes lit up. "I'd love that. I've never seen where my son works." And so, against all protocol, I gave the CEO's father the most unauthorized tour of Meridian Communications in history. We started with the creative department, where designers and copywriters hunched over glowing screens. I introduced Robert with pride, explaining through signs and speech that he was an architect who understood design. Some employees barely looked up, too busy to care, but a few shook his hand warmly, intrigued by his background. I translated where I could, bridging the gap between his world and theirs. Robert's eyes sparkled as he absorbed every detail, like a father trying to piece together his son's life through the fragments of a company. From there, we moved to account management, then to marketing analytics, and even the break room where he chuckled about coffee shops he used to haunt. Every step felt like rebellion. My phone buzzed constantly with urgent messages from Margaret reminding me I was supposed to be organizing presentation binders, not entertaining visitors. But every time I saw Robert's expression, his wonder, his pride, I couldn't stop. For once, I felt like what I was doing truly mattered. It was in the analytics department that I noticed him. High above on the mezzanine, partially hidden behind a column, stood Michael Hartwell himself, tall, composed, the very image of a CEO. He was watching us. My stomach lurched. Surely I'd overstepped. Surely this tour was career suicide. I imagined Margaret gleefully reporting my insubordination, and me packing my desk by the end of the day. But when I glanced back, Michael was gone, leaving me to wonder if I'd imagined it. We continued. In the executive suites, Robert's steps slowed, his hand brushing polished wood panels as though trying to feel the weight of his son's world. He built all this. He signed softly. I'm proud. I only wish I knew him better. His face grew wistful, shadows of old distance clouding his features. When he was young, we were close. After his mother died, he carried everything alone. I think he believed my deafness made me fragile, so he stopped sharing his burdens, and so he shut me out. My throat tightened. His words weren't just about a father and son, they were about silence, the kind born not of deafness, but of missed connections. By the time we returned to the lobby, it was nearly 300 p.m. Robert's hopes of seeing Michael had dimmed. He thanked me sincerely, his hands moving with warmth that made my chest ache. You remind me of my late wife, he signed. She had a kind heart, like you. I smiled, fighting tears, when I noticed Margaret striding toward us. Her face was thundercloud dark. Catherine, she said sharply, I need to speak with you, now. I braced myself for humiliation, but before I could respond, a steady voice behind me said, Actually, Margaret, I need to speak with Miss Walsh first. I turned and froze. Michael Hartwell was standing there, taller than I expected, his presence filling the lobby, his eyes intelligent, piercing never left mine. Margaret stammered, Mr. Hartwell? I was just about to discuss Ms. Walsh's absence from her assigned duties. She was supposed to be helping my father, Michael said quietly, and from what I observed, she did that beautifully. The lobby fell into stunned silence. My heart raced. Robert looked back and forth between us, his eyes widening with delight. Michael turned to his father and, to my astonishment, raised his hands and signed clumsily. Haltingly, I'm sorry I kept you waiting. I didn't know you were here until I saw you with Catherine. He faltered, then pushed on. I haven't seen you look that happy in years. Robert's eyes shone with tears. You've been learning to sign. Michael nodded. I should have done it years ago. I should have tried harder. I don't want to miss more time. In the middle of that polished corporate lobby, father and son embraced. The tension of years seemed to break in a single moment, replaced by relief and joy. Around us, employees paused, caught between curiosity and awe. My own vision blurred as tears spilled down my cheeks. I had never witnessed something so raw in such a sterile place. When they finally pulled apart, Michael turned to me. Miss Walsh, could I speak with you in my office? His tone was calm, but his eyes carried weight. My legs shook as I followed him and Robert to the executive elevator, Margaret disappearing into the crowd, her reprimand swallowed by silence. Inside Michael's office, sunlight poured across floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Chicago skyline. Awards and photos lined the walls, though the room felt strangely impersonal, as if even here he had built walls between himself and others. Michael gestured for us to sit, taking the chair beside his father instead of behind his desk. It was a small gesture, but it softened everything. Miss Walsh, he began, I owe you an apology and an explanation. I blinked, startled. Sir, I'm the one who should apologize. I neglected my duties today, and he lifted his hand, stopping me. You did exactly what I wish more of my employees would do. You saw what mattered. His voice thickened with emotion as he looked at his father. My father has been treated as a disruption every time he's visited this building. Today was the first time I've seen him welcomed. And it wasn't by me or by anyone else on my payroll, it was by you. Robert touched his son's arm gently, signing something I couldn't fully catch. But I saw the emotion ripple across Michael's face. He turned back to me, his voice steady though thick with feeling. I watched you today. Catherine, you didn't just help my father navigate the building, you gave him dignity. You gave him a place here. That's something I haven't been able to give him in years. My hands twisted in my lap. I felt overwhelmed, certain this was leading to a polite but inevitable dismissal. Mr. Hartwell, I understand if you need to let me go. I wasn't doing the work Margaret assigned. I put the presentation at risk. Let you go, Michael interrupted, brows lifting. Miss Walsh, I want to offer you a job. For a moment I thought I'd misheard. A job. Yes. Not an internship. A full-time position. Director of Accessibility and Inclusion. He leaned forward. We talk about diversity and inclusion in this company. But the truth is, we don't live it. We have policies on paper, but not in practice. What I saw today is what's missing. Empathy, real connection. And I believe you're the person who can help us change. My mouth fell open. I stammered. Sir, I'm just an intern. I don't have human resources experience, or policy training, or even my degree yet. I'm finishing my last semester. You have something more valuable than experience, Michael replied firmly. You have the ability to see people as people, not as problems to manage. You have empathy, and you have a skill set this company desperately needs. The position will come with a substantial salary, full benefits, and direct access to me. You'll have the authority to make changes. This isn't about checking a box. It's about transforming how we operate. I turned to Robert, whose face was radiant with pride. He signed rapidly to his son. Then to me, say yes. The company needs this. My son needs this. And you need this, too. I felt dizzy. My life had been turned upside down in a single afternoon. I managed only. I'll think about it. Good, Michael said with a small smile. Take the weekend. But I hope you'll say yes. This company needs someone like you. I need someone like you. The rest of the meeting blurred. We discussed what the role might look like, potential initiatives, and the resources I'd have. By the time I left, my head was spinning with possibility. Robert hugged me goodbye in the lobby, signing again and again. Thank you. You've given me back my son, and you've given him something he didn't even know he was missing. When the elevator doors closed behind them, I stood rooted to the marble floor, trembling with a mix of fear, disbelief, and exhilaration. That night, I called my parents, then video called Danny. His eyes widened as I signed the story, his little hands moving so fast with excitement that I barely kept up. "You're going to help deaf people at work. That's so cool. You'll be like a superhero." His grin lit up my entire screen. By Monday morning, my decision was clear. I accepted. My first task was to conduct an accessibility audit of the building and company policies. What I found was eye-opening. Meridian Communications, like many companies, had been operating with good intentions but little understanding of what inclusion really meant. Emergency alerts relied solely on sound. Company meetings had no interpreters. Marketing campaigns lacked accessibility guidelines. It wasn't malicious neglect, it was simply that no one had thought to ask the right questions. So I began. We installed visual alert systems. We arranged for ASL interpreters at meetings and client presentations. We designed new accessibility standards for marketing materials. I introduced lunch hour sign language classes, amazed by how many employees eagerly joined. Even Margaret, my old supervisor, became one of my most enthusiastic students. After class one day, she confessed, "I was so focused on tasks that I missed what mattered. I don't want to make that mistake again." We expanded beyond deaf accessibility. 2. Ramps and automatic doors for mobility access, screen reader-friendly documents for visually impaired employees, partnerships with local organizations to improve inclusive hiring practices. Slowly, the culture began to change, where once people rushed past one another, too focused on deadlines. I started to see small acts of kindness ripple through the halls. A company that had once valued efficiency above all else began to value humanity. The change was most visible in the lobby, the same place where Robert had once stood ignored. Now, visitors were greeted warmly. Whether they spoke, signed, or wrote their words, it became a place where no one felt invisible. 6 months later, Meridian Communications won a national award for workplace inclusion. Michael asked me to accept the award on behalf of the company. Standing at the podium, I looked out at the audience and said, "This recognition belongs to everyone here who embraced change. But mostly, it belongs to a wise man who showed me that the most important business skill isn't closing deals or managing budgets. It's seeing the humanity in every person you meet." In the audience, Robert signed his applause proudly. Beside him, Michael smiled with a new ease. Their relationship transformed. They now shared weekly lunches, conversing in fluent ASL. Watching them together was proof of how one small choice could ripple into something so much greater. In the months that followed the award, my role grew deeper and more meaningful than I had ever imagined. I was no longer the invisible intern tucked in the background of an office tower. I had become someone whose presence carried purpose. Employees came to me not only for resources, but also for guidance, eager to learn how to foster a more inclusive environment. What began as a job title slowly became a culture shift. I remember one particular afternoon when Jessica, the receptionist who had been overwhelmed on that first day with Robert, asked if I could teach her a few more signs. "I don't ever want to feel helpless like that again," she said. I watched her practice, clumsy but determined, until she could sign a simple welcome with confidence. Weeks later, I caught her using it with a deaf visitor, her face glowing with pride when they understood. It was a small exchange, but it felt monumental. Other employees followed suit. Lunchtime sign language classes grew so popular we had to split them into multiple sessions. Some of the senior executives, who once barely glanced at me in hallways, now sat in those classes too, fumbling through the alphabet with good-natured laughter. One even told me, "I've been in business for 30 years. But this is the first time I feel like we're building something that touches people beyond profits." Margaret, once the strict supervisor who cared only about deadlines, transformed as well. She began volunteering to mentor new hires, focusing on their growth as people instead of just their output. One day after a class, she admitted, I used to think productivity meant checking off tasks, but now I see it means building an environment where people actually thrive. You opened my eyes. Hearing that from her felt like a full circle moment. And then there was Robert. He became a regular presence at Meridian, not as a visitor lost in the lobby, but as an honored guest who was warmly welcomed by employees who had learned to greet him in his language. He gave talks about design and architecture, inspiring the creative team with his perspective. More importantly, he became the bridge that brought Michael closer to his roots. Every Friday, father and son met for lunch, something they hadn't done in decades. Michael's signing grew more fluent, and I often saw them laughing together, the gap between them closing with every gesture. I'll never forget the day Danny visited the office for the first time. His eyes were wide as he walked through the gleaming lobby, clutching my hand tightly. But when employees signed greetings to him, simple things like, "Hello, how are you?" He froze, astonished. Slowly, a huge grin spread across his face. They know my language. He signed to me. His small chest puffed with pride, as if the whole world had just opened its doors to him. I nearly cried watching him realize he was welcome in a place that once would have left him invisible. Danny became somewhat of a mascot for the office. Adored by everyone, he would draw comics for the creative department, who displayed them proudly at their desks. He challenged executives to sign with him, giggling when they made mistakes. Seeing my little brother valued, not just tolerated, was the greatest reward of all. As the months rolled into a year, the changes at Meridian reached beyond the office walls. Clients noticed. They praised the company's commitment to accessibility and often sought us out specifically because of it. Our campaigns began to include diverse representation, not as a token gesture, but as a true reflection of our values. For the first time, our mission statement felt alive, written not just on paper, but in the way we lived every day. For me personally, the transformation was profound. The shy girl who once ate lunch alone, avoiding conversation, had become a leader unafraid to stand before executives and demand change. I had found my voice, not by shouting for recognition, but by signing for those who couldn't speak in the way the world expected. One evening, after a particularly long day of reviewing new accessibility policies, I stood by the office windows, looking out at the glowing skyline Robert had helped design decades ago. Michael came to stand beside me. You know, he said quietly, I used to think success was about numbers, growth, profit margins. But watching what you've done here, it's different. You've reminded me that the real measure of a company is how it treats people. His words stayed with me, because they were true not just for business, but for life. We often get so caught up in climbing ladders, meeting deadlines, chasing numbers, that we forget the simplest truth: what matters most is how we treat each other. And it had all started with one moment in a crowded lobby. One decision to step forward instead of staying invisible. One word, signed instead of spoken hello. The following spring, I stood on a stage again, this time at a national leadership conference. Meridian Communications had been invited to share our journey toward inclusion, and Michael insisted I be the one to tell it. Looking out at the crowd of business leaders, I felt a surge of nerves. But then I remembered Danny's beaming face when he saw employees signing to him. I remembered Robert's quiet joy at being treated with dignity in his son's company. Those memories steadied me. I told the story simply, not about policies or procedures, but about people. I spoke of how one overlooked man in a lobby revealed the cracks in a company's values, how an intern's small act of kindness reshaped an entire culture, and how change begins not with sweeping statements, but with the courage to notice someone, to choose empathy over efficiency. When I finished, the applause was overwhelming. Later, executives approached me with questions about how they could implement similar changes in their own companies. I realized then that the impact had stretched far beyond Meridian. A single hello had sparked ripples now reaching across industries. Afterward, Michael and Robert congratulated me. Robert's hands signed with enthusiasm. You've changed lives, including mine, Michael added softly. And mine as well. For once. There was no divide between father and son, only mutual pride. Back at Meridian, life settled into a rhythm. The inclusion initiatives became part of the fabric of the company, no longer seen as novelties, but as essentials. I wasn't the quiet intern anymore, I was part of leadership, shaping the future. And yet, I never lost sight of why it mattered. It wasn't about awards or recognition. It was about Danny walking into any room and knowing he belonged. It was about Robert feeling welcome in his son's world. It was about every visitor, every employee, every client knowing they were seen. One evening, after Danny and I had dinner together, he signed to me. "Do you think you'll always work here?" His wide eyes searched mine. I paused, considering, maybe, or maybe somewhere else one day. But wherever I go, I'll keep doing this, making sure people like you are never invisible. He smiled, leaning against me. You already are my superhero. His words, small and sincere, carried more weight than any title I could ever hold. It struck me then I hadn't just found a career. I had found my calling. My journey hadn't started with ambition or strategy. It had started with love. Love for my brother. Love for the father who longed to reconnect with his son. Love for the belief that everyone deserves to be seen. Months later, I watched Michael and Robert together at a company picnic. Michael was laughing, his hands moving fluidly in sign language as his father teased him about his stiff formality in youth. Employees surrounded them, some signing along, others listening, but all part of the same circle. The image filled me with quiet pride. This wasn't just a workplace anymore, it was a community. And I thought back to that one October morning when I nearly stayed silent, nearly walked away, afraid of overstepping. If I had, nothing that followed would have happened. Robert would have left unseen. Michael and his father might have drifted further apart. Meridian would have continued its well-meaning but shallow version of inclusion. And I would still be invisible. But I had taken a step forward, a small step that changed everything. The truth is, life rarely gives us moments where the right choice is easy. Often, it asks us to risk something, our comfort, our safety, our job security for the sake of someone else. And when we do, we discover that those are the moments that define us. I was no longer the girl who blended into the background. I was someone who had found her voice, and in helping others be seen, I had learned to see myself again. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Sometimes the greatest change begins with the smallest gesture. A hello, a smile, a hand reached out. Don't underestimate the power of noticing someone who's overlooked. You may just change their life and your own in ways you never imagined. If this story moved you, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to leave a comment below about a time when a small act of kindness made a big difference in your life. We'd love to hear your story.